He leaned across the linen and flirted with our waitress while my wedding band caught the candlelight, and something colder clicked into place behind my smile. By sunrise, I had a buyer, a closing calendar, and a plan to sell the company he called ours without him seeing it coming. You're watching Revenge Files. Subscribe for a new twist daily. We built Pennybridge coffee roasters in Raleigh out of burned beans and stubbornness. In the beginning, it was just a leased 6-kilo roaster, a rented garage bay, and a folding table at the State Farmers Market. He had the loud laugh and a knack for charming wholesale accounts. I had spreadsheets, the website, and the habit of unlocking at dawn. We grew into 2 cafes, a tiny roastery behind a cinderblock wall, and 9 wholesale restaurant accounts that paid on 30-day terms. On paper, we were an LLC, manager managed. In reality, I was the manager who signed vendor checks and filed our annual report with the Secretary of State. He was the guy who strolled in at 10 and tasted espresso for quality control. The night he flirted with the waitress happened at a steakhouse off Glenwood. It was our 7th anniversary dinner, a reservation I'd made 2 weeks earlier. The waitress had a sweet smile and a pencil behind her ear. He leaned forward, resting his hand on the table like it was the bar, and asked for her Instagram. I didn't interrupt. I swirled my water and watched my ring throw off sparks. When she left, he grinned at me and said, "Relax, it's networking." I said, "Got it," and folded my napkin. The check came, and I didn't argue when he slid our business card into the folio for points. The network he thought he ran was built on systems I controlled. The domain was registered, to me. The trademark application lived in a folder on my desktop, and the wholesale route ran on invoices I generated. The operating agreement, printed, tabbed, and signed in 2018, gave the managing member sole authority to execute asset sales with 60% approval. I owned 62% after my second capital contribution, the one I made when the first cafe's HVAC died in July, and the landlord refused to help. He called us equal partners in front of friends because it sounded romantic. Equal was never the math. Later that night, while he scrolled on the couch, I took the operating agreement from the fireproof box under our bed. I reread the drag-along clause. If a controlling member approved a sale, the minority had to go along at the same price and terms or be diluted into a non-voting class. It was a clause he'd wanted for flexibility back when someone from Charlotte talked about rolling up brands. He'd said, "We'll want to move fast if opportunity knocks." I'd nodded and underlined "move fast." Opportunity did not knock. I dialed it. At 5:42 a.m., I emailed a woman named Gail who'd left her card back in April. She ran operations for a regional bakery group that had been sniffing around wholesale coffee. Her email signature was tidy, with a 919 number and the words acquisitions and integration. I wrote, "If Pennybridge were available as an asset sale, equipment, IP, customer list, leases, would you be interested in a quick look? NDA first, then data room access. 10-day diligence. Close before month end." I attached a 2-page deck I'd been updating at midnight for weeks, like a diary with margins. Her reply hit before 8. NDA attached. If signed today, I can dispatch a team by Wednesday. LOI by Friday if the fit looks clean. My heart thudded like a hopper kicking on. I printed the NDA, signed as managing member, scanned it on the cafe's back office printer, and sent it with a neat subject line. Then I walked the open, wiped counters, and pulled our first shot. He breezed in at 10:13 wearing a denim jacket and the kind of cologne that announces itself. I slid a clipboard toward him with the payroll register. He signed where I'd highlighted and asked if I'd handled the event permit for Saturday. "Filed it Monday," I said. He kissed my cheek and walked out to the patio to take a call. By lunch, I'd opened a clean folder named Pennybridge, Data Room. I dragged in bank statements, vendor contracts, the equipment list, and our trademark serial number. I exported a list of our top 20 customers by volume and a P&L with discretionary add-backs noted. I included a tidy explanation for the espresso machine we'd bought used from a closing cafe in December, and the small rent concession I'd negotiated during a sidewalk repair. I hid nothing and spun nothing. Numbers can convince with quiet. When Gail's diligence associate asked for proof of domain ownership, I logged into the registrar and generated the code. When they asked for a current UCC search to confirm no liens, I ordered it and forwarded the PDF. "Clean," she wrote. But then the first bump arrived on a bright blue postcard, a city code inspector's notice about the patio. Shade sail we'd installed without a permit. It had been a favor from a contractor who drank cortados and liked us. The notice said an inspection was scheduled in 10 days and mentioned a $500 day fine if we ignored it. I taped it to my office door, took a photo, and emailed it to Gail with the subject, minor code item, permit application filed today. I had already filled the online form and paid the $162 fee with my personal card. The receipt was my second attachment. Except the bigger bump wasn't paper, it was him. At 4 that afternoon, a barista texted me a screenshot from Instagram. It was my husband's name in the comments under our waitress's selfie, 3 fire emojis, and we should collaborate. The girl had tagged the restaurant and our cafe. A regular DM'd me a question mark. A wholesale customer replied with an awkward face. I didn't reply. I opened QuickBooks instead. I ran a report on his company card for the last 90 days and highlighted the steakhouse charge. If he wanted to call flirting networking, then the network could pay for it. I reclassified it as a shareholder draw. His draws had already outpaced his share of profits this quarter. His capital account slid into negative numbers like a tray slipping off a counter. I called our attorney, a woman with a precise bob and a glass paperweight on her desk shaped like North Carolina. I booked an hour for the next morning. Asset Sale LLC, I said on the voicemail. Manage member authority, drag along clean close. I'll bring the agreement. Her assistant confirmed for 9:30. In her office, I slid the tab document across the conference table. He won't see it coming, I said, and hated how small that sounded. She skimmed, checked a clause, and looked up. You have authority. Keep the employees whole, pay vendors, avoid fraud. You'll need a purchase agreement, an estoppel from the landlords, an employee offer letters from the buyer, also a plan for his access on closing day. She quoted an $8,200 retainer. I handed over my card. She slid me a checklist that was basically a recipe. By Thursday, the buyer's people were in our back room with clipboards. They measured the roaster and downloaded roast profiles. They checked the burrs on our grinders and asked about maintenance logs. I showed them the binder I'd made with dates and initials. They asked about the morning bread delivery we sometimes traded for coffee. I showed them the line item and the barter agreement I'd drafted on letterhead because I liked things formal even when they were friendly. They drank cappuccinos and took photos of the bathrooms like they were house hunting. On Friday at 3:12 p.m., Gail sent the LOI. Asset purchase of Pennybridge Coffee Roasters equipment, intellectual property, customer list, inventory at cost, and assignment of both cafe leases. Purchase price, $612,000, subject to adjustments for counted inventory and any unpaid fines. Earnest deposit, $50,000 to escrow at First Carolina Title, refundable during diligence, hard after day 10. Closing on or before July 10. I read it 3 times, then e-signed. The earnest money hit escrow Monday morning. The title company emailed wire instructions and a cheerful looking forward to working with you until he noticed something was moving he couldn't see. On Tuesday, he couldn't log into our bank. I had updated signers months ago and forgotten to remove him because I didn't want to fight. Now I did. I drove to the branch with a manager's resolution and my driver's license. The banker printed a form with boxes you initial to remove access. I initialed each one and slid it back. I felt my pulse slow when the banker said, all set. Later, he texted me, bank app down? I typed, probably maintenance. The code inspector came by on Thursday, checked the posts, and signed off on a temporary approval sticker. He wore a neon vest and a kind smile. I took a photo of his clipboard and sent it to Gail. Small fires, quick water. The mid-roll surge hit like a slammed portafilter. One of our baristas told me the waitress had been in on her day off, sitting with my husband on the patio, and a regular overheard him say, yeah, my wife runs the back end, I'm the face. The regular also told my assistant manager he thought my husband had invited the waitress to a pop-up collab. The buyer's HR head asked if there were any harassment risk or conflicts they should know about. My throat went dry. I wrote back, we have no complaints on file. I'll get proactive. Then I wrote a memo to our staff about boundaries with customers and vendors, had everyone sign it, and put it in a new folder labeled Culture and Conduct. June, I offered a $300 training stipend for anyone who wanted an online hospitality course. I didn't tell my husband. I photographed each signed acknowledgement and sent them to the buyer. Culture under control, I typed. The HR head wrote, appreciate the diligence. The day after the LOI went hard, I met with both landlords. The first ran a barber shop 2 doors down and liked to talk. The second lived in Wilmington and liked to email. I slid estoppel certificates across their tables with a printed cover letter that promised rent would be current through closing and that the buyer would assume all terms. The barber signed with a flourish. The other landlord docu-signed from his doc, his location tag visible in the metadata. I sent both estoppels to title and exhaled in the parking lot. The heat smelled like creosote and exhaust. Then I cleaned our digital house. I changed the passwords on the POS and exported the user list. I pulled admin status from my husband's login and left him as staff. I disabled his after-hours door code and assigned him a new one that didn't work until 6 a.m. I removed him from the registrar and changed the MFA to my key. I forwarded our hello inbox to my personal email and set a quiet rule that flagged anything with collab in the subject line. I didn't block him. I throttled him. He noticed the door code first. He texted me a shrug emoji at 5:12 a.m. and asked if the lock was being weird. I replied with a thumbs up and reprogrammed system. Should be fine now. It wasn't fine for him. It was perfect for me. He started using the side door and caught our baker coming in, which meant I had to explain the reprogramming to the crew. I told them we'd had a vendor break-in last winter and I was tightening things before we rolled into Q3. They nodded. They trusted me with boundaries. They trusted him with latte art. 10 days before closing, Gail's CFO sent a purchase agreement drafted in precise language that made my cheeks flush with gratitude. It named me as the seller, authorized as managing member. It listed the assets in a schedule that read like inventory poetry. 1 black 2016 Lamarzacco Linea PB2 group. 1 mill insert, 2 grinders, 3 air pots, 57 canvas tote bags with logo, 1 domain, 1 Instagram handle. The roast profiles attached in Exhibit C, goodwill not otherwise listed. It also spelled out something I had underlined. All seller liabilities would be paid or assumed at closing, and any shareholder distributions would be made after obligations. This mattered because his capital account was negative by about $27,000, thanks to draws and dinners that had never been networking. If he asked why his check was small, I would show him the math. One problem, he still didn't know, and he needed to know before he embarrassed us at closing. I printed a notice of drag to a long sale on letterhead, citing the clause he'd once loved. I sent it certified to our home and emailed it to his address with a read receipt. I scheduled it for Friday at 8 a.m. and waited. He opened it at 8:03 and texted, "What is this?" I typed, "We're selling assets to a group that will keep the cafes and the jobs. Your units will be included. The buyer needs speed." He replied, "We talk when I get in." I wrote, "I'll be at the roastery with the buyers at 10. He sent a fire emoji, which had become his punctuation for impulse. He arrived at 9:52 in the denim jacket. Gail's team was already there with clipboards and ceramic mugs that matched. My attorney sat at a back table with her laptop and the paperweight state of North Carolina staring up like a witness. He walked in, saw the stacks of forms and said, "Is this a joke?" I said, "It's a sale that puts cash in the account, pays our vendors, and keeps the staff employed." He tried to puff up and said, "This is my face on the brand." I said, "The trademark is a word mark. Your face isn't registered." He laughed, then didn't. He asked, "What do I get?" My attorney rotated a stapled packet, "A distribution per your capital account after liabilities." He flipped pages until he found numbers. The negative sign arrested him like a siren. He looked up, eyes tight, and said, "You did this to me." I said, "You did this with your card." He stood, pacing, then sat again. He tried a new angle. "I'll blow this up. I'll tell the staff you sold them out." I nodded at the buyer's HR head, who had already emailed offer letters with raises to keep our best people. The barista who texted me the screenshot had one in her inbox. I had printed a letter for the staff too, explaining continuity and thanking them for seasons. They carried milk crates through heat waves. I slid it toward him. "The staff will be fine." He pushed it away. He left to make calls that probably included the waitress. When he returned, he was quieter. He signed the consent to sale as a minority member with a scrawl that looked nothing like his signature on our wedding license. He asked if he could keep his apron. I said yes. My attorney slid the notarization across the table. He didn't look at me while the notary stamped. On closing morning, July 10th, the title company wired the purchase price to our account at 8:02. The bank notification hit my phone like a bell. I approved the outgoing wires, $22,400 to our green beans supplier, $12,600 to the landlord for CAM charges, $9,050 to our plumber for a persistent leak, $50,000 to payroll for a clean start, and $8,200 to my attorney to square her retainer. I sent $18,000 in severance across 3 people we didn't expect the buyer to keep. I paid the 162 shade sale permit and took a photo of the zero balance. When the dust settled, the net sat there in sharp digits that felt both unreal and deserved. I moved his distribution last. The negative capital account absorbed what might have been a check. I sent him $1. He had drawn his share already, plus some, one stake at a time. I sent myself what remained after taxes set aside. I named the transfer July 10th, final. At 8:30, a locksmith changed the cafe locks. The new manager stood by with a laminated emergency contacts sheet and a basket of branded polos that made our old black t-shirts look tired. She had a checklist for keys. She had a smile that said she had done this before, for bars and bakeries and a pizza place in Garner. I shook her hand and walked through each room for the last time, touching the scuffed baseboards and the shelf where we kept the good cups. I reset the thermostats 1 degree down because it had always been a sore spot between us. I handed her the tablet with the POS app, logged in under a new owner account, and a cappuccino I made with muscle memory. She lifted the cup in a salute. He pulled up at 9:06 in a hurry, the way people drive when they think apology is about to be demanded of them. His key didn't work, and neither did his code. He pounded the glass with the heel of his hand. The new manager walked to the door with the calm of someone who had been briefed well and cracked it open an inch. He said, "I'm the owner." She said, "Ownership changed at 8. You're on the no-access list noted here." She held up a printed sheet with his name highlighted. He looked past her and saw me in the back room, placing our framed rose certificate into a banker's box. He shouted, "Call my wife," I said quietly enough that he couldn't hear, "X soon." But then he pulled his phone out like a badge. He dialed the cop he liked to mention at parties. The cop didn't answer. He called our landlord, who told him to talk to the title company. He called the waitress. She didn't pick up. He paced the sidewalk, a man outside the glass of his own reflection, and I remembered him telling our friends at Thanksgiving the business would live or die on his charisma. Inside, the grinders hummed. The line grew. No one asked for his autograph. I left through the back with my banker's box, a folder of signed documents, and the ceramic mug that fit my hand. I drove straight to a P.O. box I'd rented in Asheville under my maiden name. I stopped my phone plan and started a new one. I signed a short lease on a furnished place that smelled like lemon cleaner and pine. I texted my mother that I would be fine and sent a photo of the mountains that look blue even when the sky is gray. I did not text him. He did find me, not in Asheville, but in our joint inbox, where he sent messages with subject lines like "Call me and this isn't over." He threatened to sue. My attorney sent him a packet with tabs. The packet included the operating agreement, the purchase agreement, the bank ledger, and a one-page explanation of capital accounts written like a recipe card for a man who had never learned to measure flour. He sent back a single line. "You stole my life," she replied. "You consented to the sale and received a distribution pursuant to your capital account." He did not reply for 3 days. When he did, it was a picture of an empty counter where his favorite tamper used to sit. I had left it there. Except the aftershocks weren't all his. The staff kept the shifts they wanted. 2 got promoted with real titles and dental insurance. The buyer painted the roastery wall a pale green and planted rosemary in a galvanized tub by the door. The waitress unfollowed my husband when he ran out of emojis. A food critic wrote a small piece about our local brand's new chapter, and nobody asked where I had gone. In Asheville, I woke at 5 without an alarm and walked to a diner where nobody knew my name. I drank black coffee because I didn't want to critique anyone's milk temp for a while. I started a little consulting spreadsheet titled "What I Know How to Do" and listed things like write SOPs and negotiate leases and teach a 19-year-old that a label maker can save a Saturday. A bakery messaged me for help setting up cost controls. I met them in a back room that smelled like sugar and yeast. I felt like a person who had traded pity for a purchase agreement. He did show up to work again and again like a moth to the glass, the way people return to the scene of their importance. The manager kept the door cracked only as much as her policy allowed. He never threw a scene, not a real one. He slouched sometimes and told stories about the early days to a customer who didn't know his name. He became folklore, the kind that doesn't get written down. The system ran without him. One afternoon, the new manager texted me a photo she thought I'd want to see. It was the old sign I'd painted the first week we opened, Pennybridge, small batch since 2018, now rehung and touched up. The sun lit the edges like a familiar candle. "Thought you'd like this," she wrote. I answered, "It looks right." He eventually stopped texting. A certified letter arrived at my P.O. box in August with his new apartment return address printed small. He proposed a mediated separation, civil and efficient, splitting personal property and letting lawyers draft what we didn't want to talk about. I signed and sent it back. We scheduled a 2-hour mediation in a carpeted office near Crabtree, where the mediator had a bowl of wrapped candies and the patience of hardwood. He asked for the espresso machine we kept at home. I let it go. I asked for the framed map of North Carolina made of coffee sacks. He nodded. We divided the houseplants like we were choosing teams. When the mediator handed us the last page to sign, I thought about the steakhouse and the candlelight and my wedding band flashing like an alarm I hadn't heard yet. He looked at me like a man who recognized a building he used to own. I didn't look away. I signed with my maiden name and slid the pen back. People sometimes tell me revenge is messy. They say it like a warning, like you'll get it on your shirt. Maybe. Mine came with spreadsheets and wire confirmations and a man asking a new manager to let him in. It came with clean ledgers and a $1 check and an apron folded at the bottom of a banker's box. It came with a mountain morning where I could taste coffee and not think about inventory. I kept my ring for a while in the back of the fireproof box, next to the operating agreement with tabs that led me out. When I finally sold the ring to a jeweler who paid what it weighed, I took the receipt and folded it into the same folder as the shade sale permit. Paper can sink you. Paper can save you. That night, I set a candle on my new table. I watched the light touch nothing. It didn't have permission to touch, and let it go out on its own.